Michael Donovan had always considered himself a fortunate man. At 56, he had built a comfortable life, a successful career as an architect, a beautiful home in the suburbs of Portland, and a marriage of 28 years to Eleanor, his college sweetheart. Their 2 children were grown and thriving. James had followed his father into architecture, while Sophia was finishing medical school on the East Coast. On this particular Friday in April, Michael was looking forward to the weekend. He had just completed a major project, redesigning the city's new community center, and Eleanor had suggested they celebrate with dinner at Riverview, the upscale restaurant where they'd celebrated their 25th anniversary. As he pulled into the driveway of their 2-story colonial home, Michael noticed Eleanor's car was gone. Unusual for a Friday afternoon, she typically finished her work as a high school counselor by 3. He checked his watch, 5:17 p.m. Perhaps she'd gone shopping for tonight's celebration. Inside, Michael loosened his tie and poured himself a small scotch. He settled into his favorite leather armchair in the study, enjoying the quiet moment. His phone buzzed with a text from Eleanor. "Running late. Meeting with a student's parent went long. See you at 7. Michael smiled, set his phone down, and reached for the book he'd been reading. As he shifted in his chair, he heard a soft thud. Looking down, he noticed Eleanor's tablet had slipped from between the cushion and armrest. He picked it up, intending to place it on her desk across the room. The screen lit up with a notification. Message from David. Can't wait to see you again. Last night was amazing. Michael froze, his finger hovering over the screen. A mistake, surely. Wrong tablet. Wrong David. Wrong message. He tapped the notification before he could think better of it. The message thread opened, revealing months of exchanges between Eleanor and someone named David Mercer. As Michael scrolled, his hands began to tremble. Intimate messages, plans for meetings, photos he couldn't bear to look at closely. His wife of nearly 3 decades had been living a double life. "You okay in there?" Frank Russo called from the doorway of Michael's office. It was Wednesday, 5 days since the discovery, and Michael had barely spoken 10 words all morning. Michael looked up from his computer screen, where he'd been staring at the same blueprint for over an hour. Yeah, fine, just focused. Frank, his business partner of 15 years, wasn't buying it. He closed the door behind him and took a seat across from Michael's desk. "Cut the crap, Mike. You look like hell warmed over. What's going on?" Michael rubbed his eyes. He hadn't told anyone yet, not even his children. The weekend had been a masterclass in pretense. He'd gone to dinner with Eleanor, making small talk, while his insides churned with every smile, every casual touch of her hand. He'd lain beside her at night, rigid with anger, listening to her breathe as she slept peacefully beside him. "Eleanor's having an affair," he said finally, the words burning his throat. Frank's expression shifted from concern to shock. "Jesus, Mike, are you sure?" Michael nodded, pulling out his phone. He'd taken screenshots of the messages before carefully returning Eleanor's tablet exactly where he'd found it. "Pretty damn sure." As Frank looked through the evidence, Michael recounted the past few days. How he'd started noticing patterns he'd been blind to before. Eleanor's late meetings that had become more frequent over the past 6 months. The weekend she spent visiting her sister in Seattle. The new clothes. The subtle changes in her appearance. "Not yet. I wanted to know more first." Michael leaned back in his chair. "I hired a private investigator yesterday." "I need to know everything before I make any decisions," Michael said firmly. 28 years, Frank. Our whole life together. I can't just blow it up without being certain. Michael's jaw tightened. David Mercer. He's on the school board where Eleanor works. Divorced. 2 kids in college. He'd spent hours researching the man online, learning more than he ever wanted to know about the person who had invaded his marriage. Michael stared out the window at the Portland skyline, the question echoing in his mind. What was he going to do? The anger that had sustained him through the weekend was now giving way to a deeper, more complicated pain. "I don't know yet," he admitted, "but I'm going to find out exactly what I'm dealing with first." The next week passed in a fog of surveillance reports and sleepless nights. The private investigator, a retired police detective named Harlow, was efficient and discreet. He provided Michael with detailed accounts of Eleanor's movements, including her Tuesday lunch with David at a small cafe downtown and their Thursday afternoon visit to a hotel in the Pearl District. Each new piece of information was like a knife twisting in Michael's gut. The Eleanor he thought he knew, compassionate, honest, devoted, was becoming a stranger before his eyes. On Friday morning, Michael received a final report from Harlow, along with a sealed envelope. "The last piece of the puzzle," Harlow had said when they met in a coffee shop far from Michael's office. "Photos from yesterday. I wouldn't normally show these to a client, but you insisted on having everything." Michael waited until he was alone in his car before opening the envelope. The photo showed Eleanor and David entering and leaving the hotel, his hand on the small of her back, her face turned up to his, and a smile Michael once believed was reserved only for him. He started the car with shaking hands and drove to the one place he knew he could think clearly, the construction site of his latest project, a modern lakeside home that was nearly complete. The owner was out of town, and the crew had finished for the day. Michael let himself in with his key and stood in the empty great room, staring out at the water through floor-to-ceiling windows. "Michael, I was thinking we could try that new Thai place tonight. I'll be home around 6. The casual normalcy of her voice made his stomach turn. "Actually, I need to work late." "Don't wait up." The words hung in the air between them. For the first time in their marriage, Michael couldn't bring himself to say them back. "Bye, Eleanor," he said instead, and ended the call. That night, Michael didn't go home. He checked into a hotel downtown and called his son James. "Dad? What's up?" James answered, the sound of his drafting table creaking in the background. "Just checking in," Michael said, trying to sound casual. "How's the Thompson project coming along?" They talked shop for a while, Michael taking comfort in the familiar rhythm of their conversation about work. Finally, he broached the real reason for his call. Michael took a deep breath. "Have you noticed anything different about your mother lately?" A heavy sigh. "I don't know what you're looking for here. Mom seems fine to me. Maybe a bit more, I don't know, energetic lately? She mentioned taking up yoga or something." Michael closed his eyes. "Has she said anything about someone named David?" "No, she hasn't mentioned anyone named David." "Dad, seriously, what's happening? Are you and Mom okay?" Michael couldn't bring himself to burden his son with the truth. Not yet. Not until he'd confronted Eleanor. "Everything's fine. Just some things I need to sort out. I'll talk to you soon." After hanging up, Michael sat on the edge of the hotel bed, staring at the wall. Tomorrow, he decided. Tomorrow he would confront Eleanor and hear what she had to say for herself. Michael returned home early Saturday morning, finding Eleanor in the kitchen making coffee. She looked up, surprised. "Michael, where were you last night?" "I was worried sick. I called your office, your cell." "We need to talk," he interrupted, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. Eleanor set down the coffee pot, her expression shifting from concern to wariness. "What's wrong?" The color drained from Eleanor's face. She gripped the counter behind her. "What?" "David Mercer," Michael repeated, pulling out his phone. "The man you've been sleeping with for the past 6 months." "Don't lie to me, Eleanor. Not anymore." He placed his phone on the kitchen island between them, displaying one of the hotel photos. "Thursday afternoon, the Sentinel Hotel." Eleanor stared at the photo, then slowly raised her eyes to meet his. "How did you get this?" "Does it matter?" "I know everything, Eleanor." "The messages, the hotel meetings, the weekends you were supposedly visiting your sister." Michael's voice remained low, controlled, though his heart was hammering in his chest. 28 years of marriage, and this is how you choose to break it. Eleanor sank into a kitchen chair, her shoulders slumping. "It's not what you think." "Really?" Michael's laugh was bitter. "Because I think my wife has been having an affair with a school board member, lying to my face for months, making a fool of me." "Then explain it to me," Michael demanded, sitting across from her. "Make me understand how the woman I've loved for 3 decades could do this." "Michael, please." She reached for his hand, but he pulled away. "David and I, it started as just friendship. He was going through a difficult time after his divorce, and I was helping him navigate the school system for his daughter." Eleanor flinched. "No, that came later. We connected. He made me feel seen in a way I haven't felt in years." "Have you?" She looked at him directly now, her voice steadying. "Really been here? Do you know how lonely it's been, Michael? You're always working, always focused on the next project. When was the last time we really talked? Not about the kids or the house or your work, but really talked. Michael stared at her, incredulous. So this is my fault? You cheated because I work hard to provide for our family? No, that's not what I'm saying. Eleanor pushed her hair back from her face, a gesture so familiar it made Michael's chest ache despite his anger. I'm responsible for my choices, but our marriage has been on autopilot for years, Michael. We've been like roommates, going through the motions. I know. Her voice broke. I know that, and I'm sorry. God, Michael, I'm so sorry. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of her confession hanging between them. Do you love him? Michael finally asked, the question he'd been dreading most. Eleanor hesitated, then nodded slowly. I think I do, but I love you too. I always have. Michael stood abruptly, unable to bear another moment at that table. I need some air. He turned back at the doorway, his expression hard. Fix this? You've been living a double life, Eleanor. You've lied to me, to our children. You've shared our most intimate details with a stranger. What exactly do you propose we fix? Michael shook his head. There is no us anymore. You destroyed that the moment you decided to betray everything we stood for. He walked out, ignoring her calls behind him. In the driveway, he paused, looking back at the house they'd made a home. The cherry tree he'd planted when James was born. The porch swing where he'd sat with Sophia, helping her with homework. The bedroom window where he and Eleanor had watched countless sunrises together. Michael got in his car and drove, with no destination in mind. He ended up at the lakeside house again, sitting on the unfinished deck, watching boats drift across the water. His phone buzzed repeatedly with calls and texts from Eleanor, but he ignored them all. Michael considered the offer. No, I need to be alone for a while, but thanks. Like confronting this David guy, or drinking yourself into oblivion, or making any major decisions while you're this angry. I'm not angry, Frank. Michael searched for the word. Devastated. After hanging up, Michael sat in silence as the sun began to set over the lake. His mind kept replaying Eleanor's words. He made me feel seen. Had he really been so absent? So neglectful? He thought of the late nights at the office, the weekends spent catching up on work, the vacations where he'd brought his laptop just in case. But that was what marriage was supposed to be, supporting each other's goals, building a life together. Eleanor had always seemed to understand that. Had she been silently resenting him all these years? No, he decided. Whatever problems they had in their marriage, they could have worked through them. She had chosen deception instead. She had chosen David. As darkness fell, Michael made a decision. He couldn't go home. Not tonight, maybe not ever again. But he couldn't hide out here forever either. He needed a plan. The next 2 weeks were a blur of practical arrangements and emotional upheaval. Michael moved into a furnished apartment downtown, hired a divorce attorney recommended by Frank, and threw himself into work with a fervor that concerned his colleagues. Eleanor called and texted constantly at first, then less frequently as the days passed. Michael responded only to messages about practical matters, bills, mail, the house. He couldn't bear to hear her voice, to listen to more explanations or apologies. The hardest part was telling the children. Michael had insisted they do it together, one last act as a united front. They'd sat James and Sophia down in the living room of the family home, both children immediately sensing something was wrong. Mom and I are separating, Michael had said, his voice steady despite the pain in his chest. We've decided it's best for both of us. Eleanor had looked at him sharply. They hadn't decided anything together, but she'd remained silent. James had simply watched them, his architect's eyes taking in the details. Michael's rigid posture, Eleanor's reddened eyes, the careful distance between them on the couch. Your mother has been having an affair, Michael said bluntly, ignoring Eleanor's gasp. For 6 months. How else would you suggest I tell them, Eleanor? With a comforting lie. Haven't we had enough of those? The conversation had deteriorated from there. Sophia crying, James stonily silent, Eleanor trying to explain, Michael refusing to soften the truth. They had left separately, Michael to his empty apartment, Eleanor to the house that no longer felt like home to either of them. Now sitting in his attorney's office, Michael tried to focus on the practical aspects of dismantling a 28-year marriage. Oregon is an equitable distribution state, Patricia Winters explained, adjusting her glasses as she reviewed his file. That means the court will divide your assets fairly, but not necessarily equally. Given the circumstances, we may be able to argue for a more favorable distribution. You have several options. You could sell it and split the proceeds. One of you could buy out the other's share, or you could continue to co-own it for a period of time. The thought of Eleanor living in their home with David made Michael's stomach turn. I want to sell it. Patricia made a note. And your architecture firm? That's a significant asset. The firm is separate. Frank and I established it as a partnership with clear terms. Eleanor has no claim to it. Good. That simplifies things. Patricia looked up from her notes. Michael, I have to ask, have you considered reconciliation? Sometimes in these situations, couples find their way back to each other through counseling. Patricia nodded, unsurprised. All right, then we'll proceed with the divorce filing. I should warn you, this process can take time, especially if Eleanor contests any aspects of the settlement. They met at a small bistro near Michael's firm. James was already there when Michael arrived, nursing a beer despite the early hour. Everything okay? Michael asked, sliding into the booth across from his son. James looked up, his expression troubled. Not really. I just came from seeing Mom. And she's a mess, Dad. She's lost weight, she's barely sleeping. Sophia's staying with her, but she's worried. I'm sorry to hear that, Michael said stiffly. But Eleanor made her choices. James set down his beer with more force than necessary. Yeah, she did. And they were terrible choices. But you're making choices too, Dad. You won't take her calls. You won't consider counseling. Did she send you here to plead her case? Michael interrupted, anger flaring. No, she doesn't even know I'm meeting you. James leaned forward. Look, I'm not defending what she did. It was wrong, and she knows it. But 28 years, Dad. Doesn't that count for something? Michael stared at his son, seeing Eleanor in the curve of his jaw, the expressiveness of his hands. It counted for something to me, James. Apparently not to your mother. People make mistakes. Terrible, hurtful mistakes. But they can also make amends, if given the chance. James shook his head. I'm not saying you should forgive her right away, or ever. I'm just asking you to listen to her. Really listen. There are two sides to every story, Dad, even this one. And there's something else, James continued. David Mercer came to the house yesterday. Yeah, Mom didn't invite him. Sophia said Mom was actually pretty upset that he showed up. But he was there, talking about how they could be together properly now, or some bullshit. And what did your mother say to that? Michael asked, his voice dangerously calm. James's expression softened slightly. She told him to leave, said she needed time to figure things out, that she'd made enough mistakes already. Michael absorbed this information, unsure how to feel about it. Was Eleanor having second thoughts? Or was she simply managing the fallout of her actions? Dad, James said, bringing Michael back to the present. I'm not saying you should take Mom back. I'm just saying, don't make any permanent decisions while you're still this angry. Michael recognized his friend Frank's advice echoed in his son's words. I'll think about it, he conceded. After lunch, Michael returned to his office but found himself unable to concentrate. James's words kept replaying in his mind. There are two sides to every story. But what could possibly justify what Eleanor had done? Yes. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Michael, this is David Mercer. We need to talk. Michael stared at the message, a cold fury washing over him. The audacity of this man to contact him directly. He typed a response, deleted it, typed another. Finally, he settled on, "We have nothing to discuss." The reply came quickly. "I disagree. This involves all of us now. Meet me at Riverside Park, 7 p.m. Michael's first instinct was to ignore the message. What could David Mercer possibly say that would matter? But curiosity, and a simmering anger that had never fully subsided, got the better of him. Riverside Park was busy with evening joggers and dog walkers when Michael arrived. He spotted David immediately, tall, well-dressed, with the confident bearing of a man accustomed to getting what he wanted, including other men's wives. "Michael," David extended his hand as Michael approached. "Thank you for coming." David lowered his hand, his expression shifting from confident to cautious. "I understand your anger. I would feel the same in your position." Michael remained standing. "I didn't come here to get comfortable with you. David nodded, accepting this. I came to tell you that I'm stepping back. From Eleanor, from the situation. It was wrong of me to pursue a married woman regardless of the circumstances. Michael laughed bitterly. And you want what for this confession? Absolution? Forgiveness? Neither. I just thought you should know. David met Michael's gaze directly. Eleanor loves you. What happened between us? It wasn't about you lacking anything. It was about both of us being lonely and finding comfort in the wrong place. Spare me the rationalization, Michael said. You pursued my wife knowing she was married. You helped her lie and deceive me for months. Whatever justification you've created to help yourself sleep at night doesn't interest me. Your apology means nothing to me, Michael said, turning to leave. Stay away from my family. As he walked away, Michael felt no satisfaction from the encounter, only a deepening sense of loss. David's words about Eleanor loving him rang hollow against the evidence of her betrayal. And yet, a small part of him wondered if she truly loved David. Why had she sent him away? A month into their separation, Michael found himself driving past their house, Eleanor's house now, temporarily at least. It was nearly midnight, but lights still burned in the kitchen window. Eleanor had always been a night owl, often staying up to grade papers or prepare for the next day's counseling sessions. Without fully intending to, Michael pulled into the driveway. He sat in his car for several minutes, debating whether to go in. Finally, he got out and approached the front door. He still had his key, but it felt wrong to use it now. He knocked instead. Eleanor opened the door, surprise registering on her face. She looked thinner than he remembered, with dark circles under her eyes. She was wearing one of his old sweatshirts, the sight of which sent an unexpected pang through his chest. He hesitated, then nodded, following her into the kitchen where papers were spread across the table alongside a half-empty glass of wine. College recommendation letters, she confirmed. Senior year panic is setting in early this year. An awkward silence fell between them. Michael looked around the kitchen. So familiar, and yet somehow different now. A new coffee maker on the counter. A plant he didn't recognize on the windowsill. But you were seeing him for months, Eleanor. Planning meetings, hotel rooms. The anger Michael had been suppressing began to surface again. What changed? Eleanor sighed, sinking into a chair at the table. Everything changed when you found out. When I saw what I'd done to you, to us, it was like waking up from a dream. Or a nightmare. She looked up at him, her eyes glistening. I know you don't believe me, but I do love you, Michael. I always have. Then why? The question that had been haunting him for weeks finally escaped. Why risk everything we built? Eleanor was quiet for a long moment. I felt invisible, she said finally. For years I felt like I was disappearing, bit by bit. You were so focused on your work, on building your firm. The kids were growing up, needing me less. I was just fading away. So you found someone who made you feel visible, Michael said, the bitterness evident in his voice. Yes, Eleanor admitted. David paid attention in a way you hadn't in years. He asked questions about my day, my thoughts, my dreams. He made me feel like I mattered. And I didn't, Michael demanded. After everything we've been through together? You used to, Eleanor said quietly. But somewhere along the way, we stopped seeing each other. Really seeing each other. When was the last time you asked me about my work, Michael? Or noticed when I changed my hair? Or remembered our anniversary without me reminding you? Michael wanted to argue, to defend himself. But the truth of her words stung. He had been preoccupied with his career, especially in recent years as the firm expanded. He had taken Eleanor's presence for granted, assumed her happiness was as steady as his own. That still doesn't justify what you did, he said, but some of the heat had gone out of his words. No, it doesn't, Eleanor agreed. Nothing justifies betraying you. I made a terrible mistake, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. She reached across the table, not quite touching him, but I want you to understand that it wasn't because I stopped loving you. It was because I stopped feeling loved by you. Michael stared at her hand, so close to his own. The hand that had held his through his father's funeral, that had cradled their newborn children, that had waved goodbye from countless doorways as he left for work. I know, Eleanor whispered. I don't expect you to. But I needed you to hear this, to understand that what happened wasn't just about David, or even about you. It was about us and what we let happen to our marriage long before I ever met him. Eleanor nodded, not trying to stop him. Thank you for coming, for listening. No, Eleanor said firmly. That ended the day you found out. Whatever happens between us, Michael, I won't go back to him. Michael nodded once, then left, the weight of their conversation following him into the night. The next morning, Michael called his attorney and asked about the status of the divorce proceedings. We're still in the early stages, Patricia assured him. Nothing's been finalized. Are you having second thoughts? No, Michael said quickly. Maybe? I don't know, he sighed. I met with Eleanor last night. We talked. Really talked. For the first time since all this happened. And I'm still angry. I still don't know if I can forgive her. But, he trailed off, struggling to articulate the shift he felt. But I understand a little better now why it happened. Understanding is a start, Patricia said gently. Michael, I've been doing this for 20 years. I've seen couples recover from infidelity and build stronger marriages. I've also seen couples who are better off apart. Only you can decide which path is right for you. You take time. You talk with Eleanor, with a therapist, with yourself, and you listen to what your heart tells you, not just your pride or your anger. After hanging up, Michael sat at his desk, staring at the framed photo he kept there, him and Eleanor on their 25th anniversary trip to Italy, both smiling broadly at the camera, the Tuscan countryside spread out behind them. They had been happy then, hadn't they? Or had the cracks already been forming, invisible to him but widening for Eleanor? He picked up his phone and, after a moment's hesitation, texted Eleanor. Would you be willing to try counseling? Dr. Amelia Chen's office was warm and inviting, with comfortable chairs arranged in a small circle and soft lighting that made the space feel intimate without being claustrophobic. Michael and Eleanor sat across from each other, both tense as they waited for their first session to begin. I want to thank both of you for being here, Dr. Chen said, her voice calm and measured. This takes courage to face each other and the pain between you. Over the next hour, Dr. Chen guided them through a conversation about their expectations for therapy. Eleanor wanted reconciliation, a chance to rebuild what they had lost. Michael was less certain, still grappling with the betrayal, but willing to explore whether healing was possible. Infidelity is often a symptom of deeper issues in a relationship, Dr. Chen explained. That doesn't excuse the choice to betray a partner's trust, but understanding the context can help both of you decide how to move forward, whether together or apart. In the weeks that followed, Michael and Eleanor attended sessions twice a week, gradually unraveling the patterns that had led them to this crisis point. Michael acknowledged his emotional absence in recent years, his tendency to prioritize work over connection. Eleanor confronted her resentment and her failure to communicate her needs directly. I was afraid, she admitted during one particularly difficult session. Afraid that if I told you how lonely I felt, you would dismiss it. Or worse, that you would confirm what I feared, that you didn't really see me anymore, that I had become just another fixture in your life, like the house or the car. I never stopped loving you, Michael insisted. I just got comfortable, too comfortable. Comfort can be dangerous in a marriage, Dr. Chen observed. It can lead to taking each other for granted, to assuming rather than asking, to coexisting rather than connecting. Slowly, painfully, they began to rebuild. Not the marriage they had before, but something new, something more conscious and intentional. They established a weekly date night, protected from work obligations and other distractions. They practiced active listening, really hearing each other instead of waiting for their turn to speak. The question of forgiveness loomed large between them. Could Michael ever truly forgive Eleanor's betrayal? Could Eleanor forgive Michael for the years of emotional neglect that had preceded it? Forgiveness isn't a single moment, Dr. Chen told them. It's a process, a choice you make again and again, and it doesn't mean forgetting or pretending the hurt never happened. It means choosing to move forward without letting that hurt define your relationship. 6 months after their first counseling session, Michael and Eleanor stood together on the deck of the lakeside house, now completed and sold to its owner, but open for a final walkthrough before the closing. The autumn sun was setting over the water, casting long shadows across the polished wood. It's beautiful, Eleanor said, her breath visible in the cool evening air. One of your best designs. Michael nodded, looking out at the lake. I was sitting right here when I decided to confront you, the day after I found the messages. Eleanor's expression tightened with remembered pain. I'm sorry, Michael. I know I've said it 1,000 times, but I am so sorry for the pain I caused you. I know, Michael said quietly. He turned to face her. I've been thinking a lot about what Dr. Chen said last week, about forgiveness being a choice we make every day. I want to make that choice, Michael continued. I want to forgive you, to move forward, not to forget what happened, but to stop letting it define us. I do. Michael took her hand, the first time he had initiated physical contact since before the affair. I don't know what our future looks like, Eleanor. I don't know if we'll ever get back to where we were. But I want to try to build something new with you, something better. That's all I want too, Eleanor whispered, squeezing his hand. A chance to show you every day how much you mean to me, how sorry I am, how committed I am to us. As they stood together watching the last light fade from the sky, Michael felt something shift inside him. Not forgiveness exactly, not yet, but the possibility of it. The weight he had been carrying for months seemed lighter somehow, more manageable. They had a long road ahead, both knew that. Trust, once broken, was not easily repaired. But for the first time since discovering Eleanor's betrayal, Michael allowed himself to hope that they might find their way back to each other. Changed, but perhaps stronger for having faced the darkest parts of themselves in their marriage. The next day, Michael called Patricia Winters and asked her to halt the divorce proceedings. No, Michael admitted. I'm not sure of anything right now, but I want to give our marriage another chance before I walk away from 30 years together. I understand, Patricia said. Just remember, Michael, reconciliation doesn't mean returning to the status quo. It means creating something new with clear boundaries and expectations. That evening, Michael moved back into their home. Not into the master bedroom, not yet, but into the guest room down the hall. A middle ground, a step toward reconciliation, without rushing the process. I made dinner, she said hesitantly. Nothing fancy, just pasta, if you're hungry. Michael looked up, seeing the uncertainty in her eyes, the hope mixed with fear. He remembered their first apartment after college, how Eleanor had made pasta almost every night because it was all they could afford, how they had eaten cross-legged on the floor because they didn't have a table yet. Pasta sounds perfect, he said, and followed her downstairs to begin the slow, careful work of rebuilding what they had nearly lost. The small gathering at Frank and Maria's beach house was lively with conversation and laughter. Michael stood on the deck, watching as Eleanor chatted with Sophia near the grill, their heads bent together in animated discussion. Penny for your thoughts, Frank said, joining Michael with 2 beers in hand. He offered one to Michael, who accepted it with a nod of thanks. Just thinking about how much has changed in a year, Michael replied, taking a sip of his beer. Frank followed Michael's gaze to Eleanor. You two seem good. Better than good, actually. The past year had been one of profound transformation for both of them. They had continued therapy, both as a couple and individually. They had renegotiated the terms of their marriage, establishing new patterns of communication and connection. They had even sold their house, too full of painful memories, and bought a smaller place closer to downtown, a fresh start in a space that belonged equally to both of them. Michael was quiet for a moment, considering. Neither did I at first. The anger was so overwhelming, I couldn't see past it. I did, Michael said simply. I realized I had a choice. I could hold on to the anger, let it define me and our relationship forever, or I could choose to work toward forgiveness. Not for Eleanor's sake, but for my own. Slowly, Michael acknowledged. There are still moments when I wonder, when the doubt creeps in. But they're less frequent now, less powerful. He smiled slightly. And Eleanor has been remarkably patient with my occasional need for reassurance. Across the deck, Eleanor looked up and caught Michael's eye. She smiled. That same smile that had captivated him in college, that had sustained him through decades of marriage, that had nearly been lost to him forever. Michael smiled back, feeling the familiar warmth spread through his chest. The funny thing is, Michael continued, turning back to Frank, in some ways, our marriage is stronger now than it was before. We don't take each other for granted anymore. We're more intentional about making time for each other, about really listening and seeing each other. Something like that, Michael agreed, though I wouldn't recommend infidelity as a marriage improvement strategy. Frank laughed, clapping Michael on the shoulder. Noted. Come on, I think the steaks are almost ready. As they moved to join the others, Eleanor met Michael halfway, slipping her hand into his. Everything okay? She asked softly. Michael squeezed her hand, feeling the weight of their wedding rings. new ones they had chosen together on their 30th anniversary, symbols of their renewed commitment. "Everything's good," he assured her, and for the first time in a long time, he truly meant it. Later that night, as they drove home under a canopy of stars, Eleanor reached across the console to take Michael's hand again. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for giving us another chance, for being willing to rebuild with me. I know it hasn't been easy." Michael glanced at her. This woman he had loved for more than half his life, who had hurt him more deeply than he had thought possible, who had worked tirelessly to earn back his trust and rebuild their life together. "The hardest things are often the most worthwhile," he said, echoing words Dr. Chen had shared with them months ago. Eleanor smiled, her eyes reflecting the passing streetlights. "I love you, Michael, more than I ever did before, because now I understand what it means to almost lose you." "I love you too," Michael replied, the words coming easily now, honestly. "Always have, always will." As they drove through the quiet streets toward home, Michael reflected on the journey they had taken, from betrayal to anger to understanding to forgiveness. It hadn't been easy, and there were still difficult days ahead, but they were facing them together, eyes open, hearts engaged, choosing each other anew each day. And in that choice, Michael had found not just healing but hope for a future richer and more authentic than the past they had left behind.